You know, I don't know. I was raised in a home that was a loving home, and I was a loved and wanted child, and my father had been sober in Alcoholics Anonymous for, oh, let's see, 8 years when I was born, and he died sober. My mother, my father loved each other, and they taught me about God. They taught me about the God of unconditional love, and then I grew up, and I went through puberty, and the testosterone hit the base of my brain. I went a little crazy. Then I went and got a college degree where they turned me into a good little atheist, because that's what colleges do. That I don't need God to explain the universe. And since I'm smarter than the average bear, I thought that's fine with me. And I went on down the road doing any damn thing I felt like doing. Along the way, I captured, I got into and became a raving alcoholic and cocaine addict. Not because I particularly wanted to, but because I liked the effect produced by alcohol and cocaine. So, you know, off we went. So I started drinking alcoholically in college. I was 18, and when I was 36, I started trying to stop. That's when I ended up in my first psychiatric institution. I finally skidded to a halt on November 17th, 1999. So from March of 82 to 1999, I was negotiating the terms of my surrender. And I find that is, when I look at and listen to people in meetings, we're all involved in this negotiating the terms of our surrender. I'll give up that, but I won't give up this. I'll do this, but I won't do that. Until eventually there becomes a breakthrough, and then the spiritual life is lived not in an effort, not out of fear that I may drink again, but for its own sake. I finally reached that place when I was 53. So, in the last 15 years have been, all of that makes perfect sense to me. You notice that the prayer does not say, God, relieve me the bondage of alcoholism, because that's not actually the problem. That's just the most immediately lethal symptom of the problem. If I don't stop drinking and drugging, I'm going to die and take some good people with me. And so I got to stop drinking. And since then, I've learned that, well, the big book says it. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we couldn't live up to them. So I've met God knows how many hundreds and hundreds of people who profess to be deeply religious, know all about God, yada, yada. And they have a strong belief system, but they can't stop drinking and drugging. Their life's out of control. So believing in God is not enough. Not for us. That's why belief in God is the second step, and not 10, 11, and 12. We start out with the hope that there might be some help, and that's step 2. And I only came onto the spiritual path because my life was so completely out of control. It was either blow my brains out or seek help. And so I was led to Alcoholics Anonymous grudgingly. I didn't want to come. I didn't like it. I didn't like the people I met in the meetings. I thought the book was stupid. I thought the whole program was ridiculous, and I didn't think I qualified anyway. I was really looking for the cut way back group, which is, let's just dial it back a bit. So, but they said, no, we think your case is pretty clear cut. You're probably just going to have to stop altogether, which seemed pretty radical at the time. But in any event, I came on to the path because I had a problem I could not solve by myself. So suddenly, big brain Morgan the Magnificent wasn't enough. And that's what the book says, lack of power was my dilemma. I didn't need a better belief system about Jesus or Buddha or whatever. I needed a transformative power that would change me from the inside out. And where and how was I to find that power? Well, that's the whole point to the book. You'll read that in We Agnostics on page 45. The whole point to this book is to show me, how to engineer an escape from myself. On page 62, a couple paragraphs before what Chuck read, it says, selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. I lived in a constant state of warfare within myself and with everybody around me. And I was driven by that. And for a while, drugs and alcohol kind of put that to sleep, and I was able to function a little bit. But after a while, the drugs and alcohol took over, and so I needed to learn how to not do drugs and alcohol. But when I stopped doing drugs and alcohol, what was left was 100 forms of fear: self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. That was what I presented as a newly sober alcoholic in each of the 6 psychiatric institutions I wound up in. That was how it started. And I was very angry. I wouldn't admit I was frightened. It was only later that I realized that anger is just a mask that fear wears, and that I was absolutely terrified, which I found to be difficult to swallow, but finally was able to admit it, and that I was driven by all of this, and I had no idea how to live. And so slowly and grudgingly, I began to try to work these steps the best I could. For me, I was stubborn. It was a long, hard trial and error sort of process. Alcoholics Anonymous is the largest and most successful organization, fellowship in the entire world that's made up entirely of people who never wanted to join. I mean, seriously, you know, I mean, I live up in Houston, right? Of course, this is kind of Houston anyway. I live up in Houston, right? Give you an example. River Oaks Country Club. I mean, people with lots of money will absolutely jump through hoops in order to be allowed to become a member of the River Oaks Country Club, you know, because they want to be there. Well, nobody wants to come to Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, I ricocheted in here, man. I didn't want to do this until it just got impossible. We call that hitting bottom. And so anyway, I started down this road, this process. And I remember, okay, very straight. I went to my first meeting in '82. I started getting sober for a little while in '86. And for 4 years, I stayed sober. And I went to meetings, and I did my best cut at the steps. And I was able to get past the immediate obsession to drink and drug. Life started to come back together for me, because when I don't drink and drug, I'm actually a pretty smart guy. And I was able to make some money, and life was starting to get a little better. But I was deeply unhappy. And I was one of the ones who would go around calling this a selfish program. You know, I don't want any of that God stuff. You know, I don't care about that. I'm here to stay sober long enough to get my money back. That was me. See, that was my focus. It was my deal. Some people go to meetings to score sexually, you know, and they want to find a lover. It's a meat market. That really wasn't ever my deal. My deal was to go to the meetings to make a deal, to make some money. So that's why I started hanging out at the Post Oak Club, because those people have money, and I had an idea about every 18 hours that I'd try to sell to somebody. And so I'm going around to meetings and just hanging around and working as best I could, because I wasn't ready yet. I wasn't ready. So then I had a 9-year relapse, chasing money, and drifted away from the meetings, and I got loaded for another 9 years. And finally, when I came back, absolutely just beat down to nothing. This time around, I saw what they're saying. I got it. Somehow I would been delivered to enough of a selflessness that I was actually able to see myself in all of my terrible actions. I was able to realize that I was not a victim. And that I wasn't even a victim of alcoholism. Because when I relapsed after 4 years, that wasn't alcoholism that made me relapse. That was a choice made by yours truly. Okay? So I was a volunteer on that relapse. And it started, you know, months before I started making some really bad decisions, and it took me away from the program, and I started going out on the road trying to hustle money, and it got lonely out there, and so I started eating pills, telling myself it was the same thing as alcohol or cocaine. A doctor gave it to me, so I became a pill head for 9 years, and that was just a whole another level of hell. So when I finally just ran out of Morgan and ran out of drugs on the same day, and I came back into the program, I finally could see it. You know, that we have to get down to causes and conditions. The causes and conditions are my ego, my selfishness, my vicious me first, me, my, and mine is all that's important. Every one of you is a potential enemy. If it comes down to only one person in the room is going to get a chance to live, and everybody else has to die, well, I'd be happy to kill all of you. It's very simple, because I'm going to live. See, this is the self-centered, instinct-driven, vicious selfishness, and I had it bad. This time around, out of exhaustion, I come back and I began to see it. Maybe I got a little older, or, you know, I got my ass kicked hard enough that I was willing to consider the ridiculous idea that's expressed in this another paragraph just before what Chuck read, and that is that our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. And that the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. And I remember reading that 30 years ago, thinking, well, see, that's not true of me. I must not be an alcoholic. I'm not a selfish and self-centered guy. I'm a pretty good guy as long as everybody does what I want them to. Yeah, that's great. You guys line up and do what I tell you to do. We'll be fine. But people wouldn't behave. They wouldn't do what I want them to do. So, I was codependent to the max, as we say today. So anyway, I came back and I started back through the steps. And this time I understood that what I was trying to escape was not so much the bottle or the crack pipe. What I was trying to escape was me. I was looking for a way out of the prison of 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. And they offered me the only solution that has worked, and that is the idea of dependence on God, not just belief in God. Most everybody will tell you they believe in God in some way or another, but this is about when the chips are down, do you trust God? Are you prepared to depend on God? And I finally was. And even though I had cursed God mightily many times, somehow he got over it and gave me another chance. And so Chuck said it. I mean, the prayers just invert. It stops being about what God can do for me and what I can do for God. They just become another thing. God is, the Santa Claus God. Give me this, give me that. Give me a better job, a younger woman, a faster car, a bigger house, whatever. Gimme, 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 gimme. Or God is the cosmic bail bondsman. Get me out of this mess, and I promise I'll go to church every day for the rest of my life. Of course, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, well, at least the rest of the week. So I'm bargaining with God. There is no bargain. Another phrase from we agnostics. Crushed by a self-imposed crisis, we could no longer ignore or evade. We had to squarely face the proposition. Now get ready for it. This is tough. That either God is everything or God is nothing. Not so much God either is or isn't, but God is everything. If God is everything, that means I'm nothing. I of my own self am nothing. I, Morgan, am a story made up in my head full of self-important bullshit that's all a lie. It's every bit of it's a lie. Everything I ever believed was a lie. Everything I ever did flowed out of that lie because I believed that I was actually the creator and maintainer of my own life, and I was in charge, and I could do any damn thing I wanted to do. I believed those things, and I charged out into the world and got in one war after another, basically, because I discovered most everybody else has the same delusion. So the world is in conflict, and you don't have to watch too much of the news to see that that's the normal human condition. The world is at war. Individually and collectively, people are at war with each other and within themselves. Because we all have this delusion that somehow the phrase "my life" is the heart of the problem. There's no such thing as my life. I don't beat the heart in this body. Do you beat your own heart? Can you make it stop? I tried several times to make my heart stop, and that wouldn't work either. So apparently something greater than Morgan is beating the heart in this chest. Something greater than Morgan is breathing through the lungs in this body. I'm not breathing, I'm being breathed. So they collapse into a rather radical humility that says, well, wow. I mean, I came to the realization that we're going to talk about the will of God. That can be debated forever, right? But to me, it's just dead simple. I'll show you how it starts. The will and activity of God is sobriety. And I have absolute scientific proof for it. Cannot deny this. Everybody who gets drunk passes out and wakes up sober. It doesn't matter whether you love God, hate God, believe in God, wrestling with God, curse God, doesn't matter. Everybody wakes up sober. There's a power greater than Morgan keeping this body sober, even though I, Morgan the Magnificent, up here in my big brain, am desperately trying to maintain a condition I like to call permabuzz, which requires a great deal of work. I don't know if you've noticed the toughest work an alcoholic, a drug addict has is maintaining the high. I got to keep pumping this stuff in because it's all going in the toilet. I never, the old joke about you never buy beer, you rent it. And it passes through, you know where it goes. And so suddenly a power greater than myself, a power greater than alcoholism is sobriety. It's God in action. All I have to do is learn how to accept and live with that reality. This book has taught me how to live sober and enjoy it, to accept that that's the will of God, sobriety, and to live that way. And it's really quite easy once I had this shift of attitude, of approach to it, because I don't have to pray for sobriety anymore than I have to pray for sunrises. You know, it just happens. I wake up sober. One miracle after another. You know? The miracle of a sober sunrise. Stunning. For a guy with my history, good God. I wake up every morning, get down on my knees and say, thank you. It happened again. I'm still sober. I don't have to fight alcoholism. I hear so many people in the meetings talking about fighting. They're wrestling with the demon in the parking lot that's doing push-ups. I tell you what, I spent a lot of time at the Up the Street Club, and there are no demons out there. There's some sick and crazy people, but there's no demons out there waiting to snatch up anybody who doesn't go to enough meetings. That's a self-created delusion. It keeps the ego alive. See? And what I was actually fighting was I was fighting God. I wasn't fighting alcoholism. I was fighting sobriety. I mean, seriously, is there any harder work in the world for an alcoholic to get loaded and then try to act normal and hope they won't notice? Really, trust me, they all noticed. People who were anywhere near me knew I was a hopeless alcoholic and drug addict long before I was willing to admit it. See? So the book even says it in a couple of occasions. We stop fighting. When I trust God, I don't have to fight anymore. I don't have the will of God is always better for me than anything I can think up for myself. And it took me a long time to begin to surrender to that way of life, to actually move from the argument about is there a God or isn't there a God, the whole intellectual masturbation, if you will, about that thing, and you know, and fight with. We get all stoned up in some dope house and we start arguing about God's will and is there a God, and you know, we get all these intellectual debates and we're so stoned we quit using verbs an hour ago. Nobody knows what anybody else is saying. We speak in, you know, nobody even speaks in a complete sentence anymore because we're so stoned. But we're arguing ferociously about whether or not there is a God. You know, and you know, God really doesn't care. You know, God does what God does, whether you believe in God or not. It still happens. You want to know what the will of God is? You're sitting in the middle of it. Every heartbeat is the will of God. Every heartbeat is the proof of the existence of God. Every heartbeat is proof of the activity of God, the love of God. If you're sitting here alive and sober, you're supposed to be here alive and sober. Say thank you. That's all you got to do. Oh, thank you, God. What do you want me to do now? Because I'm lost. I don't know what to do. I don't remember where I came from. I don't know any of this stuff. Show me. And he will. He'll show you. Yeah. And over time, like it says, I lose interest in my little plans and schemes. God, I had all kinds of plans and schemes. I knew from an early age. Well, okay, backstory. In order for me to get a really good education, my father, who was an engineer, worked at McDonnell Aircraft in St. Louis, and they moved into a really upscale neighborhood where the average income of the other parents, the families in this neighborhood, a suburb of St. Louis, is a good 3 to 4 times more than my father made. So, you know, I'm a senior in high school, and I'm riding to class on my bicycle, and everybody I know has got a GTO or a Corvette. And I'm going to tell you something. I developed an absolutely razor-sharp envy. I'll show these bastards. You know, and my parents are going, you know, money doesn't make people happy. And I'm thinking, how the hell would you know? You never had any, you know. I'm going to go out and make some money. I'll show you. You know, I said, well, you know, it'll make you miserable and you won't be happy. Well, you're just doing it wrong. I'll go out and get a bunch of money and I'll show you. And basically all it did was it get me this voracious, horrendous cocaine habit, you know. And the now dead comedian Richard Pryor, his line was, cocaine is God's way of showing you got too effing much money. And that's God's, yep, that's right. By the time I finished that cocaine habit, all that money I'd made in the 70s and 80s, it was gone. I was $500,000 in debt. Now, suddenly, in 1986, I'm at least remotely willing to realize that if nothing else, I got to quit drinking and drugging. And I started for that reason. And in 12 and 12, it says we were driven here by circumstance and not virtue. I was not a virtuous person when I got here. I was not an honest man. For a long time, I believed that not getting caught in a lie is the same thing as telling the truth. Think about that for a while. Catch me if you can. And so I was a manipulator and a liar and a cheat, and I'd steal your wallet and, you know, come back an hour later and help you look for it. I mean, you know, it was bad, see, because I was in the whole, you know, catch me if you can thing. And so I was out to make a lot of money, and I made it, and I lost it, and I showed up over at the Post Oak Club. At one point, I'd had 5 cars and 2 houses, and, you know, it was all, man, we're cooking now. And so I show up at the Post Oak Club, and I'm driving in a 1979 Toyota Corolla station wagon, burnt orange, ugliest color you've ever seen, cracked windshield. The radio didn't work, but the air conditioner did, thank God. And with 140,000 miles on it, some guy sold it to me. I was bankrupt. I had nothing. So I started trying to get my money back. That was my game plan in '86. I wanted my old life back. What he read says you don't want your old life back. You want the life. You're invited to investigate a life that's beyond your wildest imagination that God has planned for you if you can get your plans and schemes and ambitions out of the way. God will restore the years the locusts have eaten. It's in the book of Exodus. I love it. What a great line. The best years of our lives lie ahead of us. I mean, this is transformative. This is amazing. Now, I was stubborn, and I came to it grudgingly and unwillingly. But I reached a place now where I not only believe in God, I love God. I do. To me, the presence of God is as real as the air in this room. They're both invisible, but I absolutely trust that they're here. And wherever I am, God is. Wherever God is, I am. I cannot be separated from God. There is no separation. I'm not separate from you. We're all branches on the same tree. We're all living the same life. We're all parts of the same spirit. These realizations, and it's a realization. It's not an intellectual belief anymore. And the more time I spend in prayer and meditation and then trying to pass this on to other people, the stronger my sense of that becomes. And these prayers... that's kind of, I've worked the steps, and now what I do is I work the prayers. I study the prayers. Where I try to live now is the St. Francis prayer on page 99 of the 12 and 12, where Francis basically says, absolutely take me off the board. Just get me out of the way. Make me an empty place, a channel, a vessel, through which love, compassion, goodwill, forgiveness, joy, and hopefulness can flow. Take me away. It's not about being a better version of Morgan. It's about absolutely getting Morgan completely out of the way. This is a powerful place to get to, because now what happens is the will of God, which is the love of God, begins to be the driver, and I get to be the witness. I behold and bear witness to the miracle that God has performed and continues to perform in my life, and the miracles I see all around me now. And I try to pass that on to people who are still all closed up in their fear and their anger and their doubt and whatever. And that's the way this works. We keep it by passing it on. The Spirit has moved, and I love the way Chuck said it. That's a book of recorded miracles. And the problem of alcoholism and drug addiction was solved almost 80 years ago. And they wrote a book about it. Okay? And then miraculous things began to happen. And those miracles are continuing to happen because the Spirit continues to move at the intersection of here and now through new bodies and passing the miracle on to the next generation of people who've gotten lost out there in the weeds in alcoholism and drug addiction. And we got a society that's drugging itself to death. And so, you know, there's a lot of room for new agents for God to use, new channels for God to use to pass on the good news. Okay? All you got to do is get yourself out of the way, and the book is right. You're not going to be able to do it without His aid. I can't break the prison of my own ego without God's help. I can't escape the fear and the anger that drove me without God's help. So I learned to go to God as a first resort rather than a last resort. So this is the process. And so I'm 33 years into the program. I got a little over 15 years sober. And it's remarkable. It really is. And I'm just totally sold out to the process that's in that book. And now I'm getting into second gear. I'll be here till dinner time if I don't shut up. So anyway, I get to start talking about this stuff. Anyway, I love you guys. God bless you.